Thank you. That was an interesting loop. um, yeah, so that tune's called Alert. And that one, so I need to look at the album to know what each of the tunes are about. I don't even know, even though I wrote them. But anyway, I know this one. This is Alert, and that was written for the workers at the Woolwich.
That was a wonderful piece called Alert by Byron Wallen and his band Four Corners, who should have been appearing at Manchester Jazz Festival this week. Great disappointment to us all, and I'm sure to audiences across Manchester that that couldn't happen. However, I am graced as some kind of alternative, shall we say, with the presence of the trumpet maestro himself, the king of the conch, as we've just heard. It's Byron Wallen, live from Byron's Den. And hello, Byron. How are you?
Hello, Steve. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to see where you're hanging out as well.
Yeah, and thank you once more for inviting me to your beautiful festival. And I think this is only a temporary hold up. I think that's the way we need to look at this. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Well, you were on a huge tour. You were just about to embark. Well, I think you've done a few dates, and you were about to kind of spread across the country with this project and this band, because you just did I think you did the launch gig at Pizza Express in February or something like that.
That's correct. Yeah. It was one of those situations where it's been 13 years since I've last since since I've released an album, and the time I do release an album, firstly the launch, on the day of the launch there was a bomb scare in Soho, which meant that we had to change our destination from Soho Dean Street to Soho Holborn, which was lucky that that they had two venues. But it was it was really one of those ones where you thought, oh, it's through everything, because we had like filming um set up at the Soho. We had all the special situations happening, and we had to change everything. But we managed to make it happen.
Yeah, and
And
the audience came with you. Obviously, they kind of
they
just
did.
migrated across.
They did, and thanks to my agent Ina, who managed to make such a great tour happen. And now we're just trying to trying to put it all back in together.
Absolutely, yeah. I
So
think, well, yeah, as everyone is, isn't it? What have you been up to, Byron, during sort of lockdown? Apart from like everyone growing your hair a little bit, what have you
yeah,
been doing? Anything kind of especially interesting music, or you've been doing some teaching or writing?
yeah. I'm really very happy with my own company, and really it's really creative incubation time. So I've been working a lot on compositions. I've been looking at stuff I had before, and looking at how I'm going to release that, and how to present things really. And then as well as that, just been really getting into things I've always wanted to get into, getting back into my astrology,
Oh,
numerology,
wow.
and also really having time to reflect on this at this time about what my life and what life is really about. So I think hopefully, trying to use this time as a real kind of meditation, and a time of reflection, and to make sure that going forward, life is at a higher level.
Yeah, it's really interesting because talking to a few musicians during this period,
Yeah.
what's come through a lot is there's although the time we're going through has been imposed by
Mm.
great sadness and illness and all sorts of things, there's been a kind of spirituality which has emerged, which I think people really ought to preserve afterwards, don't they? And especially that, I mean, that's been articulated a lot by artists, as you would expect, because they are the kind of voice or the kind of mouthpiece of the society
Mm.
that they
Mm.
kind of occupy. So is that something you've also kind of picked up on and you've got a wish for continuing?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think there's a tendency in our community, people who love art, people who love and respect creation and communication. we are, you know, I'm not everyone is like us. So I think, you know, and we can
Still
see
want
that.
you, Byron. Absolutely.
Well,
One in a kind.
yeah. But you know what I'm saying? So I mean, I think politically and socially, economically, we're, you know, everyone is coming from a different place. But I think what's unique about this situation is that everyone suddenly is in the same situation, and it's, you know, the thing that we're scared about, or the thing that is, you know, is causing havoc, doesn't have any you know, discrimination in the sense of it can be anybody. And so I think this situation of all being together in some way, but being connected by this amazing technology that we have, is a unique time in history because it's never happened before. So I really do hope that we can continue and keep the spirit of what it means to be alive and part of a community, even though we're not able to you know, be together as we would like.
Absolutely. And you, I mean, you just kind of mentioned there that spirit. And I think that turning to your current project, that sense of spirit is prevalent in this particular project of yours, isn't it? It's called Portrait, Reflections on Belonging. And it struck me as it's not just a self-portrait. It's a kind of a portrait looking out as well. And that kind of sense of place about where you are, where you're from, and how that's changed around you. That's come through as the kind of not just the motivation, but that the inspiring spirit behind the music. And but it's obviously been so powerful for you because you've turned it into an art. You've turned it into something to share with us all. And this kind of transformation of your geography and history into music must have been quite a fascinating one for you to tackle.
Mm. Yes, Steve. Because I mean, the thing about it is that you know, as a musician, I've always generally done most of my work far afield. Um, Generally, not even England. You know, mostly Europe, and touring with different groups and doing projects, teaching projects, which have been far afield. And I remember once I was being called. I was called by uh, the arts, one of the arts organizers of Plumcroft School, Sophie Nicol, and she called me to do a project in Plumcroft, which was literally 10 minutes away from where I lived, and it was a situation where Abraham Wilson was supposed to be doing it, and you know, he got sick very very quickly, and as we know, passed away. So I then took over and started to work at the school, which was an incredible school, Plumcroft School. They really kind of value music, dance, and all the arts. And it's one of these kind of schools where you walk in there and you just feel the love from all the children and the teachers. And you know, they remember your name. They say, "Oh, hi, Byron, how you doing?" And it's just such a lovely place. And we managed to um, work on projects that were over, you know, that happened in different terms. Some were history projects, some were you know, to do with culture and you know, ancestry and background, and then we did some other things which were more um, directly about art and music, and so it was really an eye opener, and it was such a unique experience to be working in my close community. And I remember the feeling of that, and I thought, well, this is incredible. I need to do more of this. So then I started working at some other schools and academies closer. And then at that point in time, I would also started working at Trinity College, which is literally just down the road in Greenwich. So, and then I saw the way that I could bring these, you know, these places together, you know, primary, secondary, and further education, bringing all these pupils together in different ways, and use the music to bring them together, and actually also bring in other art forms. so we had choreographers who choreographed music to the dance, and actually the pre-launch of the album was at Plumcroft School, and they did a dance to the music that I wrote, which is yeah, I think it's Isaac Stewart choreographed that. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, it was. So it's been a real journey, really. You know, and also just that whole thing of seeing things right in front of you, and always, and actually often you don't actually or often think that what you see in front of you is as kind of valuable or as special as something that you're looking for far away, you know. And I think that's it's a bit of a metaphor, really.
Exactly what we find along the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So actually, the choreographer was Tyrone Isaac Stewart. That's his name.
Yeah. Okay. And so that all became material for this project. The kind of the band, well, your band Four Corners, which we've seen at the beginning of the program, but we'll talk about the band members later. But I suppose you envisaged this project then for this band, this particular quartet.
Yeah. Well, the way it came about was in PR. I applied for commission from the PRS, where you put different ideas of what you wanted to do. So I put this idea of a commission called Anthem for Woolwich, and I thought what was really important was to pay homage to the place where my adopted home. I'm originally from Tottenham, so I'm not born and raised here, but because I've been here since 1998, and I'm seen the changes. And really, I mean, it's a complete anti Brexit story, because just seeing the way that different communities have come into this place, and it's completely changed everything, and it's made it much more in a way, it's made it much more diverse in a way of communication and peoples, and the types of foods that are coming now, the shops that are coming in now, and just the languages, and it just feels so much more part of feels like the whole world here,
More real. Yes.
Yeah.
So do you think you're telling the story of the place through people then? You're actually
Definitely.
reflecting the people that are kind of now around in this area and around you.
Definitely, it's about the people, and it's also about the history, because I think the history of Woolwich with the Woolwich Arsenal and the artillery, and it had it was such a big a big commercial place in terms of and in terms of what they were doing in terms of developing artillery, but also the other things, that the spin-offs of that meant that a lot of people were employed here, and then as things died down with that, it became something different. And then we've got the Thamesmead, which is just up the road there, which was another kind of social experiment, where they just started taking people there. I mean, it's just so much of a history. And I think as I got into it, ideas came in which gave me the idea of the songs. Because, like, for instance, Alert was written for the workers at the Woolwich Arsenal. So and actually when you can see, when you hear the sound of it's not a conch shell, it's called a sacred shank.
Oh, thank you for correcting me there, Byron. That's
yeah,
amazing.
that's all right.
Yeah.
I love my shells. So this shell is predominantly in the Indian Ocean, and you can find it in India as well. And it's a very, very hard metal, and the sound of it, I mean, they use it in Tibet, which there's a big Tibetan community here, and they also where they use it in the monasteries and stuff like that. And the idea of it is it's a call, and if the sound of it, let me step back from the mic. I'll give you a sound. so you can hear it's very much like a trumpet. You know,
It
it's
is
very
incredible. I think
direct.
most people listening would, if they had their eyes shut, would have thought that was a trumpet.
Yeah. So I use.
Is that your voice, or is that what they sound like naturally? If anyone tried to play that, would they come up with that similar sound, or is that you
Yeah,
being a
well, I
trumpet
mean,
player?
that's me being a trumpet player, and in the way I envisage the sound. But I mean, the thing, once you make it into a trumpet, it will have that family of sound, you know. And then you can have different pitches. I've got different sizes. So that particular alert was about this very bright, and it was like that call of, oh wow, let's be mindful of what's happening here, because obviously if you're producing weapons, you need to be very alert and mindful about what you're doing with these things, and also just thinking in the current time, just how we need to be more alert than ever, in the sense of what's happening. And is as we know that this is a global catastrophe, but there will be people who will be economically profiting from this. So and so we need to be very alert about what's happening and how we protect our community.
That's like a call to action, then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everyone.
So it's actually quite relevant for this situation.
Great, isn't it? Well, it's amazing how music always seems to be relevant in whatever time it's in. You can always kind of find that relevance, through something abstract like music. How it's really, really kind of potential to speak to any generation at any time, isn't it? Really, yeah. And so those shells that you've been using, how did you come across those then, Byron? And was that an accident, a discovery, or was it intentional that you wanted to use a natural object like that to kind of articulate some of your ideas?
Well, it's for at least 30 years I've been playing them. So and I've got a big collection. I mean,
Wow.
this one. I'll show you this one. This is my Baylor shell.
Wow.
So you can see it's quite massive.
That's incredible.
And so it's quite a mad instrument. But I really got into it by I listened to a lot of traditional music, and there are cultures that use shells in terms of their music, especially like in Samoa and in places where they use the shells to cool, like in Tibet and this kind of places, but also places where they use the music to they use it as part of the musical ensemble, in Belize and places like that they use it. And then I saw Steve Turre, who's the great trombone player, who actually was playing with Roland Kirk, and Roland Kirk told him about the shells and say, yeah, you need to play the shells. And then he started getting into shells, and then he made some amazing albums with the shells. And I got a chance to meet him as well, actually, when I was blessed to play with McCoy Tyner. And he was with him, McCoy Tyner, and we talked a bit about the shells and about how he got into it. And the thing is that it's you feel the voice and the spirituality of the animal when you're playing it, and it's the sound is something that really made me excited, because it's got that kind of sound that doesn't start and doesn't finish.
Yes.
So it's kind of it just really. So for me, it's really my voice, really, the shells. Yeah.
And it's quite, because you haven't got that range of notes that you have like in a lot of other instruments. In a way, you're kind of, I'll say restricted, but I don't mean restricted, but you're limited to a fixed, I don't know, probably what you might call it a harmonic series or something, or a couple of notes on each particular shell that you use.
That's right.
So the focus, instead of like flurrying around on notes all over the place, you're focusing on on expression and just using the bare minimum of note variations, aren't you? So the whole focus
Exactly.
changes in a way, doesn't it?
Exactly. Less is more, definitely. And the thing is that so what you need to do in terms, if you're going to, so firstly, the melodies, um, the melodies become focused for that shell. So what I did was I used to go to the woods just around the corner and take each day go with one shell, and then I would work out some melodies that I liked in the woods, you know, and if I played them, and if the nightingale would sing back to, I knew I had a good tune, you know. So I'd like just work on it, and then it's like once you have the melody, you can distribute it amongst other shells as well. So within each family, I've got at least 10 or 12 shells, so I can have a family. I can make the pitches of at least, you know, within a fifth above and below generally of the note, and then obviously you've got the harmonic series as well, which you can play
So
the
they're all kind of
fundamentals.
more or less in tune with each other, the ones that you would choose.
Well, they have a similar sound. So, like for instance, this sound would so this one.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a similar tone, even though it's a different note. And then you change the pitch with your hands. So it's yeah. And then other shells have got different openings, so they got more you know, a bigger aperture, so you can actually make a bigger range of notes. But yeah, so I've been exploring that for the last yeah, at least 30 years now.
Amazing. That's
Yeah.
incredible. Have you found any like new shells that maybe no one's used as an instrument before?
Mm.
Any that you've made your own, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I mean, pretty much all these ones I've made myself. Yeah, and I've cut them myself, and you know, because you got them from generally from shell, you know, shell makers, or you know, they're not really, you can't really find them on the local beach. These ones, but you know, in Mexico I picked up quite a few, and in Indonesia I picked up a lot. You know, because you had those shops there, and really generally the ones that work have got a certain shape, because you know you have to be able to put your mouth to them, and then you know the aperture needs to be, you know, quite big so that you can at least change the pictures a little bit. So you know they all have their own voice and their own particular approach. You need to approach them differently, you know. Yeah.
And you always play them live as well within your set, and you kind of integrate your performances with playing a
Mm.
trumpet as well, which we haven't even talked about yet, which is
Mm.
fine. And I wonder how you choose what piece is suitable for a trumpet and what
Mm.
comes from the shell, and
Mm.
is that informed by anything, I don't know, within the composition or the feel or the spur of the moment? Do you swap?
Mm.
Do you play sometimes a
Yeah.
trumpet and sometimes use the shell?
Sometimes it's both, because I mean I think it's an instrument, so um it's one of those things where you know you bring what's right for the tonal color, what's right for the vibe of the song. So and also what you can manage to play within that instrument. So the shell ones tunes are generally there's parts of tunes maybe that have shells on them, and maybe if the genesis of the idea, as in alert and you know, and the fairy shell, these ones came from the shell, so the shell is the featured one. But it's also a thing of trying to within the set um work out how I'm going to approach the instruments, and putting the shell ones in the right, you know, strategic point in the set, that for the, you know, to make a good performance, but also to keep the chops happening, you know, because I think that it's a slightly different embouchure, and it, you know, if you have a lot of shell stuff and then go to switch straight directly to the trumpet, sometimes that can be quite difficult. So it's just also pacing it, and you know, pacing and scheduling.
And I wonder also, how do your, I suppose, your bandmates, how do they respond to having a shell in the band? What does that do to the dynamic, and
Well, I mean, they
how
all love the sound of the show, so it's beautiful. But you know, it's that thing of people are then being involved, it's another type of love, you know. So I think when we started to do it as you saw in the video, when it started to become more of a group effort, I think it took on its own life. And then it was more about negotiating the technology along with the band, because obviously I'm setting up a loop, so
yeah,
the loop is kind of rigid in a certain way once you've started that up, but then making it so that everyone can still have space to do their thing. And then so at a certain point I take the loop out, because you know that it kind of becomes a bit too restrictive. So then
yeah,
by then we're into something else. So every time we do that piece, it goes another way, you know. So it's also that thing of, this is just the cell of the idea, but then the idea can then become whatever it's going to become that night.
yeah, yeah. And how do
Yeah.
audiences respond to that as well? I mean, some people who know you might be expecting it anyway to hear it, but there's always going to be new audiences who are going to see music every
Yeah,
night.
but generally people come up afterwards and they say they've never seen that before, and they're
Yeah,
mad about it and they love
yeah,
it. And I said, well, yep, it's on the album.
yeah. Which we should point people to as well. We'll have some kind
Yeah.
of flag to your album as well at the end of this. But
Mm,
yeah, but also the kind of the way the band are dealing with that sound, and how you
mm,
the compositions that you bring to the band, and
mm,
including the shell and also your trumpet. I'm just also, yeah, really interested in how you made the pieces for that ensemble, including your trumpet playing and
mm,
the shells.
mm,
What is it also about those players that you chose as
mm.
well, Rob
It's very much
and
about the
Rod
players.
and Paul? Yeah, yeah,
Yes, definitely much. I
yeah.
mean, so the thing is, I think what's interesting is that I've always loved to play in groups, and I love to have an ensemble where we, you know, grow together and we try different music and play in different settings. So uh, back in 2002, I had, you know, the band Indigo, which we'll talk
Mm,
about later
yeah,
when we talk
yeah,
about Silent Praise. But you know, that was the same situation where we got together and worked on music over years and time. So Four Corners has been together really since 2000, and I shouldn't really know the numbers. I'll think about it. I think
yeah.
it's at least 2006.
Wow, yeah.
So you know, it's been a while, and it originally started, and the on bass I had Theon Cross,
Mm,
the tuba player,
yeah,
you know, and so the idea was, it was tuba, trumpet, guitar, and drums.
yeah.
Um, and you know, there's just because the tuba was really the sound of the earth.
Mm,
The guitar was kind of the sound of the air. Um, the fire was coming from the drums,
yeah,
you know, and I was the element of water.
yeah, yeah,
So, so that's why the Four Corners
yeah,
came about,
yeah,
because it was like the four elements, the four corners,
yeah,
and my interest of music from all over the world
mm,
was interested was part of that, and also bringing different eras of music. So I'm fascinated by Renaissance music, and
mm,
you know, music of core music,
yeah,
people like William Byrd,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and so that's really important to me. But then also, you know, I love the music of Thelonious Monk, and I love the music of all, you know, of the Central African Bayaka the pygmy people, and then I love the music of funk, and you know, James Brown, and then recently, you know, getting more interested in music like Bill Frisell and
yeah,
people like that. You know, so I think that the idea of these four people and those instruments was to bring all those elements together, you know. And then when Paul Michael came in, you know, on bass,
mm,
he brought something else as well, you know, with his fretless
yeah,
and fretted bass, and his sensitivity, you know, and Rob is, Rob Lofter is such a generous musician, and his passion for music is infectious, and I think I really loved that about him from the first time I met him. And um it was just like I think we did like a session at Oliver's, a jam session. He was just so in love with what he was doing, and the music. I thought, wow, this guy is incredible. And he was really young. I was like, wow,
Yeah.
and so talented. So we worked together and kept on working. And then Rod Youngs on drums. He's a phenomenal musician and very sensitive. And we explore different types of music, and especially different types of calypso, and the origins of certain rhythms, and really kind of took them apart and found different grooves within those. So that was a big part of the development of the music that's on the album, because it was, the tunes were written. A lot of those tunes were written for that commission, which was back. I need to know the dates.
Yeah.
I can't think of the date now, but it was a while ago when we did the commission, and it was all written on scored out. So then we then opened things up and made things much more organic.
Well,
Working
this
on
is good. This is really unusual about commissioned work, especially in jazz, because
Mm.
perhaps in more contemporary classical music,
Yeah.
commissions, they have a premiere. If they're lucky, they get a second performance, third performance. So when you're approaching commissions in jazz, and the input of the musicians is so integral as well as the composition. But what I find really interesting is actually how the musicians and the composers, like yourself, enable the music to live on through other kind of gigs, through other bands, and the material itself lives by changing. And each you bring with each new set of musicians, you think, oh, I'll bring that piece from that commission 20 years ago. It was something else then, but now I can turn it into something else, and still the piece is alive and changing and evolving.
So much,
Yeah.
so much so, Steve. I mean, the thing is that is this is one of the things, at Trinity, where I teach composition. We really think about, what is composition, and the essence of what you're doing when you're writing music. I think in the jazz world, the role of the player is definitely elevated, because you write music with people in mind. It's not just for a flute, or it's not just for a bass. It's for that. It's for Paul. It's for Roland. It's for whoever it is. It's for specific people who you can actually hear. Just the same way, Duke Ellington and wrote for specific players, and you can hear that in the melodies, that it was what the people bring to that performance that makes it so timeless.
Yeah.
So I mean, and also those things with the commissions, and for me, it's just a way of bringing the band together in a different way. So so like last year we did a piece at the Brighton Festival, which was called Eye to Eye, which was a commission. That was another commission, and it was a joint commission between myself and Howard Skempton, the choral composer.
Yeah.
And so we wrote a piece called Eye to Eye, and it was the project was led by Sheila Hill, who's she wrote the lyrics and conceived of this project, which was about her son Billy, and about how his formation from pre-birth till the age of 5. So the music took all of that time span in, and all the things and observations that she had. So within the band, so I had the band Four Corners were there, and we had a 100-piece choir with Glyndebourne.
Well, that's not very often you get that opportunity, is it? With those
and it's great. I mean, it brought us together in a different kind of way, and we, the sensitivity of having to play, even though we didn't play at the same time as the choir, but we had elements where the music came in, and because the choir were telling the narrative of the story as well. So that was happening. And then similarly, we were about to embark on a situation at the Young Vic, where we were going to play the music of another commissioned work, which was a conundrum, and Crying in the Wilderness, which is a theatre production, had come up with this conundrum play, which is about an autistic boy from London, and how he deals with life, and how he kind of negotiates the different conundrums and the different paradoxes within the community and life, and what you need to do to stay alive.
And do you use the trumpet in composition? Do you use that as a kind of means, or do you write in your head or at a keyboard? And how do you kind of involve your instrument in composition, if at all?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is that music is, I think about music as something that is inside, inside me and everywhere. And then the instrument, becomes, is an extension of that. So for me, I really do spend a lot of time singing and just kind of making notes on my dictaphone or on my phone of different rhythms and different things that come into my mind. Then I also have time where I spend sitting at the piano and work on I guess colors and chordal which often give me start the composition. Just that whole idea of just trying to come to sounds, get to sounds, and as as Duke Ellington says, noodles, so you're just noodling and you come up with things. And then also I try to spend time each day just playing and just so I'll just put the tape recorder on and just play for 10 minutes and just see what comes out.
Exactly, that's great. And there's that spirit of being in the moment as well, which is perhaps at the moment when we're in lockdown harder to explore because you're on your own, so you're just reacting to yourself. But that's and a lot of people do that. You've been holding that wonderful trumpet of yours, Byron, for about 10 minutes now, and I think everyone's dying to hear something come out of your mouth.
I don't know what what I'm going to play on it. It'll come.
Absolutely. But I think the other thing I wanted to ask you about was your trumpet itself, because it's such an I don't play the trumpet or anything. I don't know anything about them, but I love them, and I can see that that's a very unusual looking instrument. And the way it's kind of the tubes are kind of bridge pieces. What is it that's special about that trumpet? What makes that different from what might be called a normal trumpet?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Actually, I could do some. I can show you this.
Yeah,
but I mean, this is a lovely trumpet which is made by Taylor Trumpets in Norwich. And what I love about the horn is that it's got a certain weight to it. So when you lift it up, it's like you feel like you've got something, And the sound of the instrument is very resonant and dark. So like something like. It's got that kind of very round sound, which I really love. I mean, also I think it's a bit of a workout. So I think in this lockdown period, it's nice to have a challenge. So I feel it really blends as well with the rest of the group. I think there's different. I've got various trumpets, but some trumpets work better in different ensembles. So if I'm in a group ensemble where I'm playing with other trumpets, I probably wouldn't use that one.
Okay.
But if I'm the solo voice and that's my voice, then I probably would use that trumpet.
That is
You know.
the Byron horn. That's the one.
Yeah,
That's you.
yeah, it's my go-to horn. That's
Yeah,
my go-to
yeah.
horn.
And so that's the instrument that you've probably chosen to make the sound of your voice in this portrait, the kind of
Mm,
Reflections on Belonging project. That's the
mm,
sound of you, as well as the shells that we were talking about earlier. That's the sound that we kind of recognize as Byron coming
mm.
out through that instrument there, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, because I think the sound, sound is a very subjective thing, but
Yeah.
I think really the sound is in you. I
Mm.
always say that, and
Mm.
it's that thing of, I remember that time, when I sat in with Freddie Hubbard,
Wow.
the great master, and I remember I just got this horn at that time. And I was like, yeah, really into this horn. And then I was like, yeah, I'm sitting in with Freddie Hubbard. And I remember I've got a photo of me, um, offering him the trumpet, to play it. And then he looked at me and he said, I don't need it. I remember that. And I was thinking, yeah, yeah, yeah. But really, it's that thing of, if you got a sound, whatever trumpet you play, you're going to sound like you. It's
Yeah.
just that some trumpets enable you to do that
Yeah.
easier than others,
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to ask you at the beginning, we just got straight into chatting, was how did you, or how did the trumpet discover you?
Oh,
'Cause
good.
way
Great
back,
question.
you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is that when I play it back, I was really, the first real passion I had was the euphonium,
Ah, yeah.
which is the baby tuba. And I was in the boys brigade, and they gave me this instrument to play. I didn't want it. I really didn't want it, because it was heavy, and it never played the tune. And I was like, you know what? But somehow, by playing that instrument, it really gave me an introduction to what the magic of music,
Mm.
and about how to blend with other instruments, how to support, how to, and then the instrument itself was quite, you held it really close, and you felt the vibration of the air through the instrument, and it was really amazing. And I remember going to, there was a competition in the boys brigade where they did, there's a whole day of competition where you did athletics, you did like things like gymnastics and stuff like that. And I wasn't that great at gymnastics, and one of the one of the competitions was the pommel horse.
Oh.
Yeah, and I was on the pommel horse, and I did this pommel, and I really didn't want to do it, but we had to do it. So, I jumped onto the pommel horse, did the whole, the somersault. But then as I landed on the pommel horse, and pushed myself off, I whacked my head on the top of the pommel horse, and I remember that I had a bulb, such a big a ball on my head, from this pommel horse, and it was so I was unconscious for a little while,
Wow.
and then I remember coming to and seeing lots of people looking at me and saying, "Oh, you're right," and I was really in pain.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, they said, that obviously they said, "Oh, you can't do. Obviously, you don't have to perform on the music thing after this." But I said, you know what? I want to do it. I want to do it.
Yeah.
And this moment was really my moment of,
Wow.
this is the thing, because I've started playing this instrument, and my head was hurting so much, and every time I was blowing, it was so hurting. But in a way, I just thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take all this pain and all this trauma, I'm going to just put it into this euphonium, and I'm going to make the music with this.
Wow.
And then I did. And then I remember people were running up to me, and they said, "Byron, you've never played that before. Wow, what's happened? What's happened to you?" And then, at the end of it, I won this competition. So I was like, yeah, there's something in this. So I thought, this is like a baptism of fire into this music world. And then from there, I got into, more into music. And then I think also just, as I listened to more music, I heard Louis Armstrong, which was a big influence. Just listening, seeing his persona and larger than life way of communicating, and just so full of love and energy. And I just really thought, wow, what's he doing? And then at the same point, I remember my sister Erilyn gave me. She got me a record for my birthday, and it was a record for the great trumpeter Maurice Andre. And he was doing, I think he was doing the Hummel and the Haydn, and I remember hearing that instrument and thinking, wow, this is so angelic. And then thinking, wow, this is him, this is Louis. They're playing the same instrument. How different can you get? Yet it's the same thing. And I thought, well, this is definitely the instrument that I'm drawn to, from the sound. And then later on, listening to Miles Davis, that was a big influence as well. And the sound of the muted trumpet and the way that you can make all these different sounds within one horn. So really, I think I went from the euphonium then onto the trumpet.
Wow.
At that point.
And it's so interesting talking that you almost discovered it through resistance, resistance to pain, but that you're you're using the music as a way through the pain, but also kind of probably expressing the pain as well at the same time.
Yes.
And that enabled your discovery into what sounds like, your musical career then at that early age. It's really amazing how so many people have one really early memory, which can be something peculiar like that, you and the pommel horse in the gym. And it suddenly, when you look back years later, you kind of think that actually caused me to be a musician or an artist. And
that was a big time, and I think I was 11 or 12 maybe at that time. And it was a big thing. Yeah. And then later on, I remember going to, there was a big performance of, it was an anti-apartheid concert, which was in central London somewhere. And I remember going there and just seeing all these artists from all the places and, working and do their performance. And I was thinking, wow, this is incredible that music can be such a powerful tool of expressing unity, and I felt that for myself again, one of these ones as a child, just really absorbing the power of music. And another one was going to see Weather Report. I think that was another big. Wow. I remember going to see Weather Report, and this was must have been mid 80s. I was, well, maybe just early 80s, and just seeing again, this whole magical arena of creation, and seeing how music can really be so different, but be so powerful. So
absolutely, and that all those influences, I can hear kind of how you're talking, have all come together with this current band. Just bring it back up to the present and Four Corners and project that you would have been playing with now as we speak. They're all there in the background, aren't they? Everything from the Pommel Horse to the Weather Report gig, they're all kind of hanging around in the back of your musical psyche, and I think kind of you're making sure that they're, you're not forgetting them. They all have their own place and their own resonance, don't they? And yet,
definitely,
what you're involved in now, which is the latest project, which is an amazing articulation of like the history and the current as well, which is itself really interesting. And great. Well, Byron, we should wrap up because we could talk for hours and hours. And thank you so much, Byron, for chatting to us.
Problem.
What we're going to do, we're going to round up with another listen to one of the tracks that you performed at the launch, which was at Peaks Express back in February from the current album. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this, if you like, you want to introduce it? Because we're going to have a listen to a track called Silent Praise, which is one of the tracks featured on the album, I believe.
Oh, ba-di-di, ba-di-da,
Was it?
ba-do, ba-do, ba-di, ba-di-da, ba-do, ba-di, ba-do, 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 ba-di, ba-di-bi-di, ba-do, ba-do, ba-di, ba-di-di, ba-do, ba-di, ba-do, di-do, ba-do. So that's really, that tune
Yeah.
was part of the Indigo album in
Yeah.
2002. It's a very special time in my life where, you know, it was four musicians who uh, really gave so much to this project. You know, they used to come around to my house and we used to literally rehearse every week, and we didn't have gigs. We just rehearsed just to get music together. And I remember we had then we had this week of gigs in Brixton, and we kind of worked the material out even more. And then we started doing gigs, and then we recorded, and we actually recorded the album right here in this room that you're
Wow.
looking at here,
Wow.
which was another crazy trip.
Mm.
But you know, and I think again, it was like this the music. It was a different process because I was, even though I wrote the music down and it was all kind of on my sequencer, um, I didn't give music to anybody. We all kind of, everything was learned by ear, and I think it's a different approach to learning, and one that obviously needs more time, but we had the time then. You know, it's a different time in our lives, and you know, and the idea of the album was different time signatures and different ways of moving and different grooves and different you know, different perspectives on time. So this one, you know, the Silent Praise, I think it's in 10. So I was just really thinking, so the idea was to have things were in different times, but somehow they wouldn't feel like they were in a different time. So, you know, it would feel like get into the swing of it, so it becomes natural, because, you know, I mean, we feel music mostly in four over here, but, you know, there's different cultures have different time signatures that they have, you know, obviously six, and there's cultures that have five, you know, and all the tunes are in five, all the tunes are in six, all the tunes are in three, all the tunes are, and so, you know, just kind of by listening to that and dancing with different musics to feel where that pulse and where that groove really feels, is really what this tune is about. So you've got that bass line, and then you've got the counterpoint between the two lines. So you've got that, you know, interaction of the two main
Yeah.
voices that are
Yeah.
coming together with the
Yeah.
polyphonic melody. Yeah, I love that tune.
That's great. Well, let's hear it in action, Byron. And another great example of how, you know, your composition can live on, you know, 20 years later, or almost 20 years later,
Amazing.
in a totally different form, but still be, you know, the wonderful creation that you brought into the world as well. So yes, thanks so much, Byron, for your time. We're all really looking forward to the time when we can see you live in a theatre or a club. Let's hope that's very soon, and hoping you're staying well as well in the den, and hope that you
Deep
get
in
your
the
music
den.
out. Yeah. So let's close with a listen to Byron Wallen and the band Four Corners and Silent Praise.
We're going to now go back in time to 2002, and we're going to do a nice meditative, chilled out number, we hope. And this one is entitled Silent Praise, and it's from the album Indigo. silent praise.